Here we go around the table. We are recording this episode of Now and Next on Tuesday, March the 3rd. It's just after 10 o'clock, so I'm just warning you. Things may have changed by the time you hear or see this. But we'll get to a bunch of the issues that are really flying at hyperspeed. And to me, it's really interesting. Last week, we started off by suggesting that there were so many stories in the news, and the story was about the conveyance of the story. It was the communication around the stories. 2 weeks later, here we are. We're with our cast, our comms and strategy team. Bob Reid is here, along with Lindsay Broadhead and Anne-Marie Aikins. And Lindsay, when we look at what's going on, last time we talked, we riffed heavily on the communications and what came out of Tumbler Ridge. And maybe to our surprise, to some degree, varying degrees, we looked at the posture and the presentation of Pierre Poilievre. And despite what he may have said otherwise, it was seen as an important moment for him to express himself authentically. Since last we spoke, he was in front of the Economic Club here in Toronto, and then sat down for an interview with Peter Mansbridge on his podcast. And just overarching, there seems to have been some continuity, shall we say, in terms of the strategy around reimagining Mr. Poilievre's image. The four of us left the room last time thinking, Tumbler Ridge was great, but can he sustain it? I'm beginning to get the sense that he is trying desperately to sustain it, and he's doing a pretty decent job at it.
Yeah, there's so much there to tackle, and it's funny what a week or whenever we last spoke, a couple of weeks, the incredible sea changes that have happened in the world. And it's not going in a direction that I'm remotely comfortable with. I'm sure none of you are either. Poilievre seems to embrace the religion of Stoicism. It's something that he has referenced on a few occasions, certainly in the Mansbridge interview, which was excellent, actually, and I highly recommend it. He also quoted various Stoics in his speech, which is interesting. Again, and he's done this in the past, it's a very highfalutin academic exercise for the regular audience. Most people aren't very well versed in the Stoics. What it is, though, is a intended, purposeful means to a calm approach. I'm suspicious that a person can change on a dime. I'm suspicious that the multiple years of high level performance we've seen from this leader can pivot that quickly. However, this world has pivoted very quickly and dramatically, as I started with, and maybe he is embracing that as a sign of the times. So that's one thing, is to have a philosophy as a leader like that you follow. Another is it continues to be an act of necessity. His numbers have gone down dramatically. He's shown lack of control of his caucus, despite the kind of weak messaging, frankly, around the Jamil Javani visit to the States. I thought his response was incredibly weak. But what he's doing is, from Tumbler Ridge, not because of that by any means, but certainly that was one of the first moments, his re-election speech, where he isolated key subjects like domestic issues, home-related issues, heart local, everything that Carney's not able to do right now. He's distinguishing himself in that regard, which in small ways, but he's also hitched his wagon to the Carney beast, which is moving quickly around the world and partnering around the world. And that is how he's distinguishing himself and making clear what his views and reflections of Trump are, when he's being criticized at vast lengths about not commenting in strong ways about the leadership to the south. So he's doing it in very subtle ways, but he's carving out an incredible new path that we haven't seen him on yet. Whether he sticks to it, the jury is out.
Well, the interesting part of the conversation, there was many, I thought, with the Mansbridge discussion, and we'll get into it more deeply, but to your point around his reference to Donald Trump, that in fact there were criticisms within the conservative circles suggesting that it was almost as if Poilievre was afraid to say Donald Trump's name out loud to some degree or criticize in any way. And Mansbridge brought that up. And back to your point about stoicism, that's pretty much how Poilievre framed his approach to Donald Trump.
As I age, I become more stoic in focusing on what I can control. And Mark Carney actually said something that I think is quite wise. He said, nobody can control what President Trump does. So we have to focus on what we can control. And that means strengthening ourselves here at home, so that we have unbreakable leverage when we negotiate with him or his successors. Prime Minister Harper had a lot of wisdom as well. He said, we cannot focus on how the United States makes us feel. We have to focus on what we have to do to adapt. And that's my focus.
Yeah, Bob, and I thought it was an interesting, twist on the bridge there, because when he looked at it and said, here's how I'm dealing with Trump, he acknowledged the fact that, Carney's approach is actually the right one in terms of not worrying about things we can't control. But then kind of turning it back domestically and saying, we need to really focus on it locally, making sure that we're as strong as we possibly can be, because that's where our leverage is with the Americans to make sure we're strong at home.
All of these points are, I think, fundamental sea changes in Pierre Poilievre's approach. I mean, you listen to that clip that you just played, and he's praising Mark Carney. Like, whoever thought we'd hear something like that come out of his mouth, and it follows on the Tumbler Ridge approach, where he gave Carney. He gushed about Carney and his grace in bringing the leaders together to come to that vigil, and his grace in how he, as the head of our government, has handled things that he never in a zillion years would have said about Justin Trudeau. So there's a significant change there. The fact that he's naming Trump and being critical of Trump is unprecedented in the Poilievre lexicon up to this point. So these are significant changes in his approach in terms of the things that he's saying and how he's saying them. And in the bigger picture, he's doing a couple of things as well. As Lindsay put it so well, he's hitched himself to Carney's wagon in terms of the global statesman-esque kind of moves and measures and rhetoric that Carney's using about middle powers, about controlling what Canada can control and those things. He's echoing those. But at the same time, he's also threading the needle that every opposition leader needs to have, and that is not just opposing for the sake of opposing, which is part of the duty, but finding a way to do it that doesn't necessarily crap on the government just because they're the government, even if they're doing some things that actually are right for the times and make sense. He's found a way to give a nod to that, to give an acknowledgement to, Carney said something wise. Carney's making some right moves. However, he's finally found the however in terms of the answer to the question, well, what would you do differently if you were in charge? How would you be different from what we're seeing here? And he's making some points that way as well in terms of specifically how he would navigate the waters. So I think he's finally turned a couple of pages which will set him up well in case, as Tim Hudak said on your other podcast, Dave, it's really up to Poilievre's fortunes now are so much up to Carney. If Carney missteps, that will open a door for Poilievre that right now otherwise probably won't be open because Carney's executing so well. So I think the shift in Poilievre's positioning is setting him up much better than his previous positioning, so that if Carney starts to fumble, if Carney makes some mistakes, if people start saying, oh, I'm not so sure this guy is all that in a bag of chips like we thought he was initially, then Poilievre's in a better position than he was just being the anti-government guy, the bumper sticker slogan guy, the nickname guy. All of that stuff's gone away, which is another significant change in his positioning. So either he's getting it, that I need to be more moderate, more thoughtful, less pitbull all the time, and or he's got people around him. He's got a new chief of staff. Maybe that's part of the picture, but whatever it is, I think it's working, and I'm pretty impressed.
Well, you talk about the bumper sticker approach and the labels and all that. What he has become, like this working meme all the time. It had been, and Anne-Marie, when we think about the U.S. election, Joe Biden was saying, don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. That's pretty much what's going on here. And to the degree to which Mark Carney a year or so ago has come in and reset our expectations of the Prime Minister of Canada. He has, redefined or rehabilitated, maybe, depending on how you look at it, what that office has done or what we expect of our Prime Minister. In so doing, inadvertently or not, Mark Carney's posture has actually improved, or given the opportunity for Poilievre to improve and become a stronger leader of the opposition. And politics aside, I think that's entirely necessary.
I agree. I kind of have this two things happening for me. I think he wasn't so much Carney that inspired Poilievre to change, but the leadership convention. I think that he got an ultimatum, and then Tumbler Ridge gave him kind of a vehicle to show that side of himself, to show a more compassionate, a humanized Poilievre. But I think two things are happening. One is he built his brand, his popularity with his base was built on hating Trudeau and on those slogans, the rhymes. So his base, that's what they liked him for. And will they like this version of Poilievre? I'm not really sure. And the other side of me is wondering, is the people that didn't vote for him, that really hated the constant, that hated the slogans, hated the kind of hateful messages constantly, and the fighting and the so forth, the lack of solutions and so forth, hated that part of Poilievre. I don't think we're buying it. As Lindsay said, we're skeptical. How can you see change like this overnight to become a completely different person? And what I'm seeing is a very different person. And I think I have got this cynical view that it seems every photo I see of him, I don't know, there is this, this fakeness behind his eyes. And so I'm not buying it. And I wonder if other people are like me. They're looking at it and going, I'm not buying this. He's going to slip. He's going to look for his opening, as Bob says, and then just go for it. He'll be right back to Poilievre. And that's what his base wants. I don't think his base is going to like this person.
So David Coletto and the pollsters will be watching Anne-Marie specifically to judge how well Mr. Poilievre's going to do. Because if they can turn her around, he's in like Flint.
But they will,
the other
right?
thing, he's not getting the media attention. He doesn't get the media attention, does he? He has to manufacture the media attention, go on Mansbridge, do speeches and so forth. His rhyming got media attention, and he's going to have to replace that. So, sorry.
So go ahead, Lindsay.
Well, no, all I was going to say is Coletto will be looking actually exactly to the likes of Anne-Marie or I, because we're women. We live in an urban environment in Ontario. And we are, maybe not us as individuals, but as a demographic, we're exactly who Pierre Poilievre historically has been unable to attract or speak to. For the reasons, some of which Anne-Marie mentioned. his disposition as much as the way he delivered messages from a data point of view is exactly what didn't connect. And there are a few demographic cohorts where he actually needs to move those individuals. And to Anne-Marie's point, at the risk of whom, right? So we know it's been well discussed that he attracted the youth vote that wasn't there before. He's, I'll call them the MAGA, further right, more sympathetic to a Trumpian notion or point of view, more sympathetic to separatism, perhaps. People who are certainly looking more at pocketbook issues, how much groceries cost as opposed to, international relations. Those are all the things that are both at risk of losing if he's hoping to attract other cohorts. So he will be looking to Anne-Marie Aikins.
Well, no, and I think, but that's it. That was at the heart of the questioning that Mansbridge put to him, and he touched on this in the podcast, and points out that a year ago you were very much a different guy than what we're seeing in the last month.
It's been almost a year. How time flies, right? Since the election, and I'm just wondering, in that year, have you changed? Has Pierre Poilievre changed in the way he operates, the tone he uses, the discussions he has, the interviews he gives, all of that? I'm wondering because people say they watch you. They watch you to the speech you just gave in Toronto. And they say, that's a different kind of Pierre Poilievre than I saw a year ago. Not necessarily in what you were saying, but how you were saying it, how you interacted with others. I mean, you're not holding an apple here with me.
I should be.
But you know what I mean.
I still love apples.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of things I'd go over. One, on you mean interviews that I give. Well, this is my first time on your show. I made a decision on interviews that I'm going to go everywhere and talk to everyone. And that means talking to people with whom I disagree, or who might cater to an audience of voters who are in different parties. I think in order to grow, we have to reach out and talk to people who have different viewpoints than us. And so I went from having a very focused strategy of talking to, using social media and reaching out in a very controlled way to specific outlets, whereas now I think I'm just going to talk to everybody. Go as far and wide as I can, reach as many people everywhere possible. I think temperamentally, I've become more stoic. As I mentioned, I did quote some of the Stoics in my speech today on Canada-U.S. relations, but I think it's true in politics as in life that the only way you can get through all of the drama of life is by focusing on the things that are in your control and letting go of the things that are not. And that has been the single biggest thing to make political life more enjoyable, frankly.
So you have changed then?
I mean, I'd like to think that I'm improving all the time. I'd like to think that I'm improving all the time.
Again, not necessarily what we would have expected in terms of, his approach to the media. I will say one thing. First, he acknowledges, Bob, that he's doing the Mansbridge show for the first time. And for those of you who don't know, Peter Mansbridge used to be something big deal at the CBC. So I'm just saying. Other than that, against the backdrop of all of his, defund the CBC, get rid of the national broadcaster, everything else, then to sit in on Mansbridge's show. Now, if you haven't listened to his podcast, it's essentially, an extension of the show he would have done on the national at the CBC. It's the same cast of characters he's got on. He, same kind of approach to his reporting and his analysis, and it's very, CBC-ish. So the people who listen to that podcast are the CBC audience, I would think, primarily. And again, back to Lindsay and Anne-Marie's point, he's speaking to a different audience. And I think he rung the right bell there, first of all, but he came back to I'm going to be a calmer, more stable approach to this. I want to take the drama out of the politics. This sounds very deliberate to me. It's not a one-off.
I heard Pierre Poilievre saying those words, but in my mind's ear, I heard his internal pollster briefing him and saying, this is the problem, and this is the path to the solution. You can't just keep pushing things out on social media to the echo chamber that loves who you are and what you do. You can't just only talk to friendly media. You've got to break it out further. The only way you've got your base. The only way to grow beyond that is to go into exactly the kinds of media environments and everywhere else that he was talking about. So I'm sure that comes directly from what their internal polling is telling the Conservative Party. And good for them. That's why you poll. Okay, where are we strong? Where are we weak? How can we come up with a strategy to address that weakness and come up with some growth? So it's only smart politics, and it's smart communications layering in with the political dimension. The other thing is, I think Stoic is now the new Poilievre drinking game. You have to take one every time he uses that. It used to be Justin. Now it's
just inflation.
Just inflation.
Yeah.
That's right. Lindsay, when we look at this, though, this is the show is called Now and Next. Here's where we are now. What's the next thing we've got to watch for? Is whether it's the budget that's going to, come out, and how is he going to respond to that? Back in the House of Commons, he's a different animal, clearly, than he is when he's sitting in front of somebody who's doing an interview with him, or going door to door, or sitting in front of a group of people at a convention. Will that be the benchmark in terms of, how does he handle himself in the House of Commons facing the Prime Minister?
First of all, Peter Mansbridge is the best, and he's entering his Oprah years in the most wonderful way. Like that cadence of questioning was hilarious, I find. Very, two men just talking about emotions and stoicism. So I find that interesting in a very real way, actually. Last week we talked about actions and how leaders they just can't use words. They need to do actions. So Poilievre did this very well in the Trudeau years, in all the ways we've talked about the words and the phraseology that he used. But part of his menu of actions that he took was to not take interviews, was to, in a very, again, echoing Trump type of mantra, the left-leaning media, fake media, all of that stuff. This is a marked change, and I would almost say the biggest one. So, props to old media and new media, because there's going to be more action happening on your playing fields, perhaps. But if he starts taking interviews with what traditional media outlets couldn't access before, that's going to be very different, because he's going to be posed different kinds of questions. And again, this is a different action set than we've seen from him. One thing that's currently in Carney's favor is consistency. He's consistently above the fold as it relates to politics and the dirty side of politicking. And that's perhaps what's at stake for him in the Liberal crowd. So it's going to be interesting to see where consistency sits. Can Carney keep in his lane, keep above the fray, and keep doing what he says he's doing, and demonstrate action? And then equally for Poilievre, he's now entered perhaps 2.0. PP 2.0. Is he going to keep down that route, or is he going to retract to different means? Because whoever loses the consistency game is going to be giving points to the other side in a big way, because that is what will change the game.
Yeah, it's interesting, Anne-Marie, in the course of the conversation, Mansbridge said, do we need an election before the review of the free trade agreement with the United States, just to make sure we've got a clear mandate here and we can move forward on it. And he was very pointed in Poilievre saying, no, we don't need an election. Whatever, we're going to be one voice. We're going to move forward. The Prime Minister is going to take the lead on that, and that's fine. He was elected on that. So to some degree, he sounded as if he was supporting the Prime Minister, but he's also kind of hanging him out there saying, okay, pal, you got elected on the mandate. Let's figure it out. So that will test the Prime Minister in the coming months. He's going to have to, come to the table with something that's tangible for Canadians, because we've given him a good deal of leeway and a rather lengthy honeymoon at this point.
Well, I think he was more motivated by his Carney's popularity right now. I think he knows he hasn't had time to create this new image and woo new voters. He hasn't had time yet. This is just a brand new one we're just starting to get to know. And Carney is very popular right now. So I think it was very much all of this is about polls and how they're polling. But I think what's next is just to see who the real Poilievre is. Cause I still haven't bought this is the real Poilievre. Was that old one a real Poilievre? So it'll be interesting. It'll also be interesting to see how he's going to keep his base entertained. And one of those is through Twitter, because we all know what Twitter has become. And I do notice there's a bit of the old Poilievre. If I have the stomach to go to Twitter and look at what he's saying, it's a little bit of the old Poilievre. So it's important to keep an eye on that, how he's because that'll end up biting him eventually. So it'll I'm very interested to see where this goes, to see, was it a facade before, when he was this, bombastic slogan throwing out kind of guy that got headlines from the kind of wild things he would say and the accusations he would make. And he won't get that anymore if he's going to be this new Poilievre. So he'll go back to the interviews. You just might get him, Dave, on your podcast, because it looks like that's his strategy right now, is just to get out there, make news by being in the news in a more legitimate way than these slogans. It'll be very interesting to watch where he goes, and watch Carney to see if he consistently performs the way he's performing, as Bob said. He just performs really well, and Canadians are liking that consistency. Whether or not they see all of these deals he's making as progress, that will depend on his messaging and how much that resonates with Canadians. Is that going to replace the deal he had promised with the U.S.? It really, will depend.
Well, Bob, yes, it's about performance, and we've seen the Carney performance gets high marks there. Progress is probably next there, because the idea that the free trade deal that was announced with India, the uranium component there, the rare earth part of it. Scott Moe loves going on trips apparently with the Prime Minister, because he's always front and center. He's getting something out of those deals every time he attends. But produce for me now. Produce something that is actually going to make a difference for me. So there are three things I can see sort of that are going to converge very quickly. What's going on in the Middle East. We now have a full-blown war that involves 12 countries all of a sudden. When last we spoke, there was, just I use that advisedly, what's going on in Gaza. But now, this morning, we've got Israel into Lebanon. We've got, all the other countries in the Gulf region responding and saying, Iran, if you don't back off, we're going to retaliate too. So we're on the verge of a very dangerous regional war there. We've got a federal budget that's coming. And now, we've got that free trade thing with the U.S., and that's going to start in a couple of months. Carney's going to have to play a really careful but I think, bold game here in terms of getting to Anne-Marie's point, is making sure, yes, I'm performing well, but we really need to be seen to put Canadians first, and we need to feel it. And we can start with, how he responded to the war on Iran.
Yeah. And all of those things are 30,000 foot level for most of us. We see him, Carney, all over the world, right? Just back from India with a trade deal there. He's been, I don't think there's a country or a region anyway, a major trading region that he hasn't been to where he hasn't had these high level bilateral regional trade discussions. And all of that is critically important, obviously, given the rupture, as he calls it, with our traditional trading relationship with our single biggest trading partner. So all of that stuff is in play. And he's got to respond to that at that 30,000 foot level, that global level. The liability, the vacuum that I see forming is at the Main Street level, at the domestic level. It's all well and good that we're fast tracking, these big major development projects, building high-speed rail and mining and all of that stuff that's big, that's weighty, that has economic and job creation clout. It's all very important, but it's all very long-term. And it's not eye level. And I think that's the vacuum that is growing as Carney's focus remains at the global statesman kind of level. Again, that's very important, but you can't take your eye off the Main Street ball, off the wallets of Canadians and the day-to-day lives of Canadians. So there's a potential liability there for Carney if he doesn't start to address that fairly quickly, and a potential opportunity for Poilievre, who's been consistently good on the pocketbook issues and that kind of stuff. So in terms of here's the now, what's the next, that's what I'm going to be watching from Carney, is how does he try and come back and reconnect with Canadians, not just by attending local events and things that he has been doing, but on the policy front, on bringing things forward that we will actually feel, that we'll see and feel in the short to medium term. Because that's always the clock that's ticking as well for anybody in public office. What have you done for me lately? It's great that Canada is being repositioned and we have these agreements that over time will generate good things for the country and will trickle down. Full points for that. But it ain't changing my life, is what a lot of people are feeling and will continue to feel. And that's the area that needs addressing.
Yeah, the idea that, we should all be concerned about what's going on in the Middle East for sure. That's the global situation, security is a concern for all of us. But to Bob's point, it's hard to translate what's happening in the Middle East to a kitchen table issue because, you know what? We just went out and bought a roast for my daughter-in-law's birthday this week, and I felt like I had to take out a GoFundMe campaign just to make sure we were paying for it. So these are the real issues, and I think to some degree, again, going back to Poilievre and over the last couple of weeks, he's managed to sharpen his focus on that without sharpening his language on it. But, we talk about what's next and where, if the Prime Minister is going to stumble, it's probably around issues around accountability on some of this. How is he going to thread the needle on some of these bigger topics and bring it down? But in the short term, during his trip as we speak, he has not spoken to the media and taken any questions on any of this in 6 days. And to me, I put yourself in the chair for the comms director for the PM. Are you pulling your hair out? Or are you just okay with moving forward with keep them over there at the other end of the plane?
Well, I'm sure that was very strategic, given his availability would not have had anything to do with, unfortunately, with what his intended goal is there for example, at India. Why he canceled it was because things are so volatile in the Middle East and with Trump. Why this war is happening and whether or not Canada supports this war is still, it's so fluid. It changes depending on who's speaking in that very moment. From hour to hour, it changes why the U.S. is at war. In the U.S., the reason for it changes all the time, which is crazy when you think about it, whether or not it's a legal war. There are so many big, huge questions. I completely understand why they strategically canceled his availability. He does tend to do that, kind of control it for a while, and then he opens it up. So I'm confident he will, but it's difficult because when he's over in India making these great deals, it's easier to communicate why this matters for Canada, but it's very hard to translate why does this matter to me today, to my housing, to the groceries on the table, to the gas I put in my car. It's really hard to translate that, and that's usually one of the hardest questions for organizations that are trying to communicate something, or politicians, is why it matters. And they speak at the very high level and why it matters to Canada, which means at this moment in time when people are struggling, it's harder for me to imagine as a person why this really matters to me.
So for everything that's going on around the world and all the drama and all the tragedy and the warring factions in the Middle East, Lindsay, we're 100 days away from the World Cup, and FIFA is coming to North America, and several of the countries that are involved in the conflagration in the Middle East will be sending teams here. And it occurs to me that the backdrop of, sport and brotherly love all of a sudden, is a hard turn based on what's going on around the world. And it's going to be curious to see how, from a comms perspective, how our governments stick handle that moving forward. And who knows what's going to happen in the middle of the World Cup, because it's a weeks-long event. And given the weeks-long situation we've seen here, things turn on a dime. As I said off the top, things may change by the time you hear and listen to this. That has never been more evident than we have seen since January 1st of this year.
Yeah, this is fascinating from a comms point of view. It's, let's point out the obvious. It's not a single country. There's 3 countries. So it's Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. There's currently kind of guerrilla warfare happening down in parts of Mexico. The United States is the United States. Canada is Canada. We're involved, either immensely directly or indirectly in a number of international now wars or conflicts. We're donating money, weapons, in some cases people, to different parts of the world. And this particular event is, touted as one where we're welcoming the world. So it's a fascinating juxtaposition. We just went through the Winter Olympics, which, as it always is this wonderful moment of when countries can come together and where sport is everything that it is supposed to be. It's a joining and a bringing together entity that very few things can do. But we also know, the 4 of us are in Toronto right now, but this is true for every participating city. You're going to have corporations and sponsors by the dozens and hundreds who have a vested interest and point of view, bringing their own brand, their own employee base and culture, their own politics, frankly. Some brands have points of view on these issues. So that is one cluster of stakeholders. You're going to have municipal politics, provincial politics, federal politics, state politics coming together and having a point of view and an invested dollar in it as well. Plus, in big urban cities in particular, you have, as we've seen, any number of different cultures coming together in protest, for or against not only an event like this, but for the events happening on the world stage. That is a cluster of crisis and issues management issues to deal with, and none of them will be dealt with centrally. None of those are FIFA related challenges per se. They're going to have to be manned and controlled on the ground, as it were, in many cases. So, while the message of 100 days out is going out today, and there'll be great celebration as there should be, this is something, I'm a fan of sport. I'm a huge advocate of. In the same breath, we're welcoming the world to our front doors with all of the baggage that the world currently has right now. So yeah, it's setting the stage for this is going to be case studies for communications are going to be coming out of this.
Well, in the old days, Bob, the worst comms obstacle was just dealing with the rat bag of FIFA. I mean, the only group that's more corrupt than FIFA is the Olympic Committee, right? So that was the only thing, and we could all, yeah, give or take, I get it. What day is it? So, but that would have been the only thing to worry about. It's interesting, Lindsay has this whole long list before she got to FIFA.
Yeah. Yeah, she's right. It is a cluster and then some. But it's also, everything is moving at beyond real time, if you will, in terms of the potential impacts on the World Cup, on all of that. Nobody can make a call on anything at this point, because who knows where we're going to be 2 weeks from now? Who knows where we're going to be a month from now? It's impossible to predict. Therefore, it's impossible to plan. You can contingency plan, and I'm sure there's a ton of that going on right now. But I think in the short term, it's just got to be head down, business as usual is our MO until we get to a bridge that we've got to jump off in terms of some set of circumstances bumping up against the timing of the thing that requires wholesale change. And then it will be FIFA's problem at that point. I mean, as host country, host cities, there's only so much we can do. We're not going to pull the plug or radically change plans on anything. We have to wait and see how the event is going to unfold from the top down. And FIFA doesn't have a clue right now, and they won't for some time. So I don't envy any of them, but I don't expect we're going to see a ton of communications right now, other than we're monitoring the situation. We are putting plans in place for potential scenarios, but no decisions are getting made until we're in a position to make decisions.
Well, I go back to a couple of weekends ago, Anne-Marie, when there was they estimated that there were more than 250,000 people on the streets in Toronto for this, anti-Iran protest and march, and it was all very high level. It was well organized. It was relatively peaceful. I mean, it got never really got out of hand. I mean, I think there was one arrest, and it had nothing to do necessarily with the march. And I was thoroughly impressed by Toronto police the 2 or 3 days beforehand, saying, "Hey, here's what's going to happen. Just be aware. We're doing this, and this. It's going to affect your transit. It's going to affect your ability to get in and out of your neighborhood, all of those things." And the implication being that whoever organized it, they had all the right permits, they talked to the right people, etc. So, one, that could happen during FIFA, because the world stage will be, your oyster for that perspective, and you can take advantage of it. On the other hand, there's also the distinct possibility that we'll get pop-up protests and demonstrations. So the ability and the willingness of, whether it's police forces or municipalities, and those are the people who are pretty much going to have to manage those things, their ability to be ready for the comms strategy is critical, well beyond what goes on at the stadium.
Exactly. I think this is a huge opportunity on so many levels, and the communications aspect of it fascinates me, because crisis comms fascinates me. But I was involved when I was working at the city and when I was working for the province, that when these huge events, and this one's going to be massively huge, there's a process in place that happens years ago. So as soon as we won FIFA games, we knew there were going to be games here. They would have convened an interprovincial, intercity coordinated group of transportation, security experts, the police, the EMS, fire, everyone you can think of in the city. There is this coordinating group that's been working together. And most importantly right now, I think, is the police has a full security team. We don't see much of this work that goes on behind the scenes and how they are coordinating this and adapting their plans given world events. So this is a huge opportunity. And I think the mayor tonight is the 100 days, and there's starting with an event to launch the 100 days. And I think somebody needs to be out there pretty much every day communicating to the city about our security and transportation plans. This is, underway to really convince people that we have a handle on this event and we can handle it throughout the event, and have the experts at the table that are working on this. The other opportunity I see is that for our tourism, our Destination Toronto, Destination Ontario, to really sell Canada and Ontario for our economic stability, for our safety, and our security. And it's a place to come where a lot of people don't want to go to the U.S. right now. Their tourism is way down because of the lack of their stability. We can sell Canada as a place to come. I know many people are hurting and they're feeling like, I can't afford a home. I can't afford groceries. I have to take out a loan to get my roast, as you said, Dave. But at the same time, Canada does have the most, one of the most stable economies, the most responsible leadership, and we are a very safe country. So we need to sell ourselves to the world. It's a really good opportunity, I think, and on so many levels. But we got to do it right. We really have to do it right from the get-go. And I'd like to see a bigger presence talking about the plans that we have, not just celebrating, but talking about the plans and the work we're doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, and I think, Lindsay, this goes beyond the politics. I mean, whether the mayor buys into FIFA, that ship has sailed, and she can point to John Tory and say he's the guy that can be blamed for it or whatever. But I think that on the ground, boots on the ground feel to this is really what's going to be critical in terms of the communications. How are we going to make sure that this is done, that's done? I thought they did a pretty good job when we had, the Pan Am Games. Again, not nearly to the scope of what we're about to face. For example, in those days, I think it was 2016, you knew that this lane of the Gardiner Expressway was open only to, transporting athletes back and forth and so on. And we didn't just get through it. It was a pretty decent time in the city. And the only reason that worked is because they said it out loud, they said it early, and they said it often.
Isn't it funny how sometimes I feel, and this is probably not good for any of our careers to say this, but sometimes I feel like communications is so obvious, and we keep coming across the same themes over and over again. And you've hit on at least, a title of a chapter of the book, if not the title of the book, which is get ahead of the problem, own the solution, say what you're going to do, right? Like, I feel like almost every time we gather, that's the thesis. I have full faith that this is going to be nothing shy of awesome, right? That Toronto's going to absolutely light up, that we're going to be able to showcase our communities, that Vancouver's going to shine, that Canada's going to look great. I'm an optimist, I hope, in all of these things. What we have behind us is a number of different levels of either government or first responders or what have you, who have the opportunity to get ahead. They've had incredible practice. I hate to say it, October 7th was a moment, I think, for great reckoning in terms of how we communicate about what's allowed, what's not allowed. We're still learning, but I think there's been a lot of lessons learned by those in charge. In terms of what's permitted, what's not. So if those lines are clearly delineated, if someone goes out of line, go protest. You can protest over there. You're protesting over here, you're out, right? And there has to be those kind of responses that are black and white, clear, and consistent. And that will happen. I have complete faith in that. But if to your point, to Anne-Marie's point, but all of our points is if you don't communicate that in advance, then you're leaving the field wide open for trouble. So there you go. Easy comms. Easy comms.
In the old days, I would have said that was a keeper. We're going to snap the tabs on the cassette there just so that we can't erase that. If you understand that, you're of a certain age. If you don't worry about it. It's just one of those things. All right, let's leave it there on a note of optimism, and that is our cast, our comms and strategy team, Bob Reid, Lindsay Broadhead, Anne-Marie Aikins. And if you are watching on the YouTube, just make sure you hit the follow button or subscribe, and you'll get notifications of every time there's a show that drops in there. By the way, you also get On the Ledge, your Ontario Politics podcast, in that feed. So if you're listening on any of the audio platforms, make sure you hit follow as well. And from time to time, I drop this one into the On the Ledge feed just because there are things that overlap, and I think that audience really needs to pay attention to what this crew has to say. All right, that'll do it for us. I'm Dave Trafford. This is Now and Next. Have a great week.